Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Winter Greens Workshop Cooking Class. I'm Stephanie Jordan. I'm the Local Food Program Manager at Sustainable Solano. And I'm really glad to have all of you with us here today. We're going to talk about a lot of different kinds of greens. As some of you may know, if you've been with us before, you know that this is one of many cooking classes that Sustainable Solano is doing over the next year or so to raise awareness of specialty crops, which are grown here in Solano County by our local farmers. And if you're not familiar with specialty crops, they are basically things that we eat. It's fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, and culinary herbs. There's also some flowers and some nursery products in that mix, but for our project, we are focusing on all these wonderful edible specialty crops that are grown here in Solano. So this is also part of Sustainable Solano's larger mission and vision to raise awareness of our local farmers and also to build a more robust and resilient local food system in the county. And there's a lot more information about that vision on our website as well as our current work. So I encourage you to check out sustainablesolano.org for more information on all of that. All right, before we start, just a quick reminder, if you guys have questions as we go, you can put them in the chat, or toward the end, you can do the raised hand function. And I'm going to go ahead and start doing a couple prep items here while I talk to you about some other things. So we are doing 2 recipes today, and I'm going to be kind of toggling back and forth between them. And I'll have Allison go ahead and share the recipes right now. The first is a braised winter greens recipe with coconuts. It's like a coconut curry, braised winter greens. There we are. So just so you guys know, for this particular recipe, I am just going to do a half recipe because it's a lot of greenery, and I only got a pound of this lovely curly kale in my CSA box here. So I'm going to be just doing a half version of this, but you are definitely, you know, it works fine either way to do a full version or a half. And then the other thing that we're doing is called Caldo Verde. That is a Portuguese potato and winter green soup. It's kind of funny. I think I put potato and kale in the header, and then I'm talking about using collard greens. So I'm actually going to put a little bit of both in our Caldo Verde today. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do next is kind of just give you the overview of how this is going to go. So because I'm doing 2 recipes and there's a lot of different, they're not so much different ingredients, but there's multiple steps in each recipe. I'm going to start with the braised greens and get that going over here in my blue Le Creuset pot. And then I'm going to put it on the stove top over there, and then we're going to shift gears over to the soup. And then when the soup is kind of doing its cooking process, we'll jump back over to our braised greens and then wrap it up at the end. So, okay. So as you can see, what I'm doing first is I am trimming my curly kale. So again, this is for the braised greens with the coconut milk. And so there's my curly kale. The fastest and easiest way I find to deal with this is you hold it by the stem, and you want to hold it kind of so that you're looking at the back end of the kale, and so I can see where the stem is. And I'm just taking my chef knife and I'm just zipping right along the stem. I go zip, zip, and then I'm left with the stem, and I put that in my compost bin. And you can get through this pretty quickly. So you're going to see me do it again for the soup, but this is my curly kale. And this started as a pound. So in case you're wondering about the measurements, this was weighed as 1 pound before I started trimming. So that's how you want to do the measuring and the weighing. So I'm just about done with this, actually. And then also just a tip on this knife skill deal here with the stripping of the kale. You want to make sure your knife is really sharp. And we can go over some sharpening strategies at the end. Just please remind me. So sharp knife is what will help you to get the kale off quickly. Sometimes these you can strip, but as you can see, it takes a little bit longer for me to grab it and pull it off. And it's not as clean. You're kind of, I'm going back and leaving all these little bits. So I do kind of like this knife trick here. All right, let's talk about some other ingredients that are going to show up in our curry. I'm almost done with this kale here. We have some onions and some ginger and some garlic. I have a ridiculous amount of leeks right now, so I'm going to do leeks in place of the onions, or maybe half and half. I did find a small onion that I could use up too. So just feel free to interchange those. I know that leeks are very in season right now. And so whatever you'd like, whatever you prefer. All right, I think I'm at the end there. I have a couple little pieces. I must have had some. I started to chop a little bit earlier today. All right, so there's my one. Again, I'm doing a half recipe. So 1 pound of kale. And because those little leaf sections were relatively small, they weren't giant, I'm not going to bother to go back and cut these down because as I was stripping them, they kind of just fell apart into small pieces. So that's what that looks like. Okay, and I'm going to do this in this Dutch oven, which is cast iron. So this is a braised dish, and I wanted to show you a couple pieces of equipment that you can also use. I have a couple different braising pans that I thought I would show and tell here. And so braising is about starting it as a saute and then shifting to basically like you're steaming. So it's not really starting as a dry heating method and then going to moist, but it kind of is, because sauteing, you know, you do have some oil in there. So the main thing about braising is that you need a lid. So this one, as you can see, is a little bit curved on the sides, and then this lid goes on top. This is one of my favorite pans. I think it's all clad. Nothing seems to stick to this pan. I don't know what their magic is, but I think this is actually sold as a braising pan. So you can see but it doubles as a saute pan, which is kind of nice in my kitchen because I always need this extra saute pan too. So it's got the curved sides, but it also has the lid. So having your lid is key for braising because you want to finish your dish with by steaming. So this is another one, but it has straight sides. It's a little bit larger, kind of the same deal, but straight-sided. So the straight-sided pans are not going to let as much liquid escape when it's cooking from the steam. It's going to kind of help hold it in a little bit better. All right, so there's those two pans, or you can do this Dutch oven. I'm actually using the Dutch oven today because this works on the induction burner. The cast iron works on this little machine here. So, all right, so let me get the other things ready. We need to get our onion and some aromatics ready, and then we can start this recipe over here. So the leeks, I already washed it and kind of trimmed it up. Leeks have a lot of sand in them. So what you want to do is, I have the other half over here somewhere. I'm going to use it in the other recipe. You know, it starts off kind of like this as a unit. So you want to cut it lengthwise so that you have these two halves. And then what I do is I fan it out like this. If you can see this, there you go. I'm fanning it out while I'm running it under water or running water over it, and it'll help get any of that sand and grit out. So that's how you wash the leeks. And then once I have my half of the leek here, I'm just going to go across, just going to cut it into little strips. I'd say this is like, I don't know, 1/4 inch thick or so until I get to the end. The other thing I did before when I cut it in half lengthwise is I trimmed off the root. So, and this is just a little bit of the root that's left, so I'm going to discard that. And I'm looking for approximately half a cup of this, and it looks like we made it there with that one leek. I don't even really need the onion. So I'm going to put this in my little bowl here. Okay, so half a cup of leek or onion. Again, this is half of the recipe. And we're going to put in some garlic cloves, roughly 3-ish. Move that so you guys can see. Okay, I do the little whack trick and get the papers off. And then we'll just give those a quick chop. I've got a couple. This is like super fresh garlic because the skins just do not want to come off that easily. Okay. All right, and then another handy piece of equipment I'm going to use, which if you've been in my classes before, you know all about, the pastry scraper or the bench scraper. Excellent for getting little bits of garlic off of your cutting board. Okay, give these a quick little mince. You can also press your garlic if you have a garlic press. I used to have one. Who knows where it is now? It got lost, so never replaced it. Okay. So you'll see that I'm kind of changing the position of my hand from when I was initially doing the leek. When you're chopping, you want to have your hand here like a fulcrum almost to help move your knife up and down. Okay, there is that. Let me put my garlic in another little bowl. All right, now we have some ginger. So this is fresh ginger root. I don't think you could really substitute very easily dried, but I suppose you could try if you are in need. So the best way to get the skin off of the the ginger, is to use a little spoon. I just have a teaspoon measuring thing here, and I'm just going to scrape that along the skin, and it helps to get the outer layer off without wasting a lot of the flesh, which is where all the flavor is. Okay, and once I've got, I don't need a whole lot of this. I just need I don't know, half a teaspoon or something. No, 1 teaspoon. Okay. So once I've got my outer bit scraped off, I'm going to use a microplane, which is this gadget. Very useful also for getting zest off of citrus. So I'm just going to rub the ginger, I keep wanting to say garlic, rub the ginger over the microplane. And then once I have a little bit, once I'm kind of down on this little knobby bit, I'm going to give it a tap, and then all of the grated part falls from the other side of the microplane. Okay, that looks like about the amount I need. I'm going to grab a couple other small prep bowls here. Never have too many of those. Okay, you know what though? We're adding the garlic, the ginger, and the curry powder all together. So I'm going to put that in the same bowl. Okay, so there's my teaspoon of ginger. And then we are going to add a little bit of curry powder, just the stuff from the store. And I need about half a teaspoon of that. So this is kind of the cheater version of, you know, the curry. Although a curry is kind of like the thing with the sauce. It's like something that's cooked and it has almost like a gravy is what my Indian friend would say. All right, so let's just see if we got everything ready to go here. We're going to put in our leek, and then we're going to, let me turn this baby on. Okay, and then we're going to add kind of our aromatics. And if any of you guys saw Chef Chantal Williams in her Jamaican cooking class, she was talking about burning your curry. And so it's kind of the similar idea where you're really cooking the garlic and the ginger and the curry powder and any dried spices that you might be using, because it really helps to release those flavors in those spices. I'm going to be using avocado oil today. I'd like to do something that's kind of neutral. I don't really want to use an olive oil. You know, I love olive oil, but you know, the flavor is just going to get lost. And so I'd rather do something a little more neutral. So I'm just going to put in a couple tablespoons of avocado oil. Let my pan heat up a little bit here. And let's see, grab a spoon. Another thing that's kind of handy to use when you're cooking with these greens are some tongs, just because to get them to move around in your pot is a little bit hard with just a spoon. So I find that tongs are good to kind of grab them and flip them almost when you're doing this kind of a dish. Okay, so I believe this is starting to heat up. My oil, when it starts to kind of run like water, then you know that it's hot and ready to go. So this is very straightforward. We're just going to start off by sauteing this stuff, putting in the greens, and then we'll add some of our liquids, and then I'm going to stick it over on the stove over there to finish up. Okay, so I got a little sizzling here with my leeks. All right, so while that's happening, let me just get a couple other things prepared, which we're going to need to have later. So I have the coconut milk here. Any canned version will do. I feel like the full fat version is going to give you a better result than the light, but you can use either one. Okay, and this one needs to be stirred. There's a lot of yummy looking coconut cream here on the top. It's kind of the thick fatty part that goes on the top. So I'm going to try to, I might have to put this in another bowl and whisk it around actually. And then we'll measure. Okay, I know what I should do. Since I'm only doing half of this, I'm going to put it in a measuring cup and then I'll just eyeball it out of there. Okay, so my leeks are starting to get a little bit soft, and I'm also noticing that at first they turn a brighter green color, and then they'll kind of start to soften and maybe even brown a little bit, and that's okay. That browning is caramelization, and that's going to help build flavor in our dish. Okay, let's see what we got here. Okay, so yeah, this is almost 2 cups, so we'll just do about 1 cup, maybe a little less. All right, there we go. Set this aside. All right, so my leeks are ready. They're looking really limp right now. So I'm gonna add the garlic and the ginger and the curry. This is very aromatic. I wish you guys could smell this. It smells super yummy. Okay, and I don't really need to cook this for very long because the ginger and the garlic are cut up very fine, and so it's not going to take it long to cook. All right, now we're going to put in, since this is a large amount of greens, we got to do it in stages. So I'm going to put in about half, and I'm going to flip it around with my tongs. And I'm going to notice kind of the same thing with the kale. It's starting to turn bright green, kind of a dark green and then a bright green. So that's what you want to see. And it should start to wilt a little bit. And then once it wilts down and it's kind of under control and I have room in here, then I can put the rest of my greens in. And then we'll add our liquids. So this recipe calls for some kind of broth or stock. I think, did I put down, oh yeah, I said chicken or veggie. I'm gonna do a veggie for this one. So you can definitely make this vegan, I believe. Yeah, I think this is a vegan recipe. Or you could add some chicken broth if you have that on hand. Either one is fine. You know, if you have neither, water would work too, but you'll get a little bit extra flavor with either the veggie or the chicken. All right, so in goes the rest of my greens. Again, it's a little more flipping needs to happen here. Whoop, one's trying to escape. Okay, I'm gonna move that around. Okay, I'm also gonna put in a little bit of salt. Let me grab, you like to use kosher salt, Morton specifically, just because I'm kind of used to how it tastes and how it behaves. All right, and I'm going to now put in the broth and the coconut milk. So here's my veggie broth. I'm just going to add this to this same container. I just need about a half of a cup. Okay, so in go the liquid. And then I'm going to quickly cover it, and I'm going to move it to my stove. and it's gonna finish up over there. So here's where the steam process comes in, and that's gonna help the greens to cook a little more quickly and evenly too. If I were just to stand here and keep flipping and kind of sauteing, it wouldn't work quite as well. I just want to get the moisture kind of distributed around all of the leaves here. Okay, that looks good. All right, let's see here. Let me put these back over there. Turn that off. This didn't get very hot. Some stuff for the next thing. Okay, so I'm going to keep this on high for a little bit, and then I'll turn it down. And we'll wait for that to be done. Next up is our soup. Okay, there we go. All right, let me just clear a little space here. Okay, I think I'm gonna keep that there. Here. All right. Just a quick note too about when I was prepping the kale for the braised recipe. You guys know I love my salad spinner, but you do not need to worry about having your greens all that dry, because it's gonna end up in a pot with liquid anyway. And you always have the opportunity at the end to kind of reduce down and boil off some of that extra liquid. So don't worry about it. Don't even bother doing all of the routine with the drying and the spinning. Okay, so now we're gonna jump over to our Caldo Verde. So you could add chorizo. Oh shoot, I forgot to get one, hold on, sorry. I do wanna add it in there. In the other fridge. Okay, here we are. So I just have some pre-cooked Silva chorizo here. You don't have to use chorizo for this. You can just, again, leave it without the meat. But I find that this gives it kind of a nice smoky and a little spicy flavor. So we're gonna add a little bit, because I really do like it. And I'm not gonna put all of this. This was an 11-ounce package. I'm just gonna do roughly half. And so this is just gonna, I'm just gonna cut this up into some chunks, and we'll start by sauteing this in this other pan. And it's gonna help, again, we're basically building flavor. So we wanna have a little bit of the oil from the sausage. This was linguiça, sorry. So chorizo, the kind of chorizo that I really like to use is a Spanish style chorizo. It has a lot of paprika and garlic. I'm pretty sure Silva is the brand that makes it. I use it a lot when I do tapas dishes and paella and stuff like that. I couldn't get it for today, but I do just want to let you know that it's a pretty tasty brand. Okay. And again, this meat is already cooked, pre-cooked. We're just going to kind of heat it up and let some of the flavors come out, and then that'll kind of merge with our olive oil that we're going to use to cook our aromatics in there. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw a little bit of olive oil. About a tablespoon or so. Okay, swirl that around. And we'll start cooking this. Okay, while that's doing its thing, we will move on to, hold on here. Get right there. We're gonna do more aromatics over here. So again, I'm using leeks because I got a lot of them. Leeks instead of the onions for this. And same deal, I'm just gonna go right straight across and slice these up. Okay, I hear my my linguiça, chorizo. I'm going to keep saying chorizo, even though it's linguiça. Bear with me. So I have a feeling I may not need all of this leek. Let's see here. I think we just need about 1 large onion. This looks like about the equivalent. We're close, so. Let's just use it. Why not? So for this soup, I think I called it a creamy caldo verde, and there's a reason for that. We are gonna make it creamy, but we are not gonna use cream. So what we're going to do toward the end of the soup process is we're going to puree and emulsify some of the soup base, which is going to be the potatoes and the broth and some of the leeks that we're putting in. We're going to blend that in a blender with some olive oil, and it creates a really nice, rich, emulsified, you know, it almost is like the idea of putting cream in, but it's like a thick, emulsified broth that we will then add back into the soup. Okay, that's looking good. I'm going to let it go a little bit more. And then we're gonna take that out. I'll stick it in here. So for the potatoes, these are Yukon Golds, and I'm gonna leave the skin on. I tend to like this soup a little on the hearty side. So I'm just gonna cut these into chunks, you know, kind of like bite-sized chunks. And again, a lot of it will get, well, not a lot, but some of it will get pureed into the soup. Okay, looking good. Okay. All right, that's ready. I'm going to grab a glove thing here. I can see my braised greens over here are boiling, so I just turned those down to low. And what I'm doing with the chorizo linguiça is I'm just kind of trying to grab it out of the pot, but leave some of the juice and the fat in there. Okay, so in go my leeks. Get all that yumminess out of there. And it looks a little dry, so I'm going to add a little extra olive oil. All right, we're going to put in some red pepper flakes and also a little salt and pepper, and then some garlic as well. And I got a little bit ahead of myself, so I'm going to turn this off just for a second while I get the other things ready. This will just kind of soften and do its thing over here. But I'm going to finish getting the potatoes ready and the garlic, and then we'll turn it back on. This recipe, I am doing the full version. So this is 2 pounds of potatoes. I have 1 pound of greens, and I'm using collard greens as well as dino kale. And I'll show those to you before they get chopped up. Okay, so while I'm cutting potatoes, I wanted to have Allison share with you guys a couple spots on our website which shows where you can find a lot of these local ingredients. You know, I tend to talk a lot about the local food page, and I thought, you know, I think it might be nice to actually show the local food page on our website. So if any of you registered via Eventbrite and haven't really been to our website, I'm going to have Allison give you do a little tour. So Allison, I don't know if you want to talk, or otherwise I can kind of glance up and walk people through it while I'm chopping. So this is our landing page for the local food system page. And so underneath here, what we're doing is we're having a little local food spotlight. So we have radishes up right now. I think winter greens were last month, so I'm a little behind here in my class. So we're going to be featuring some ingredients every month with a link to some recipes and just some information about it, how to prepare them. For the radishes, I did do a class last spring, I believe it was, and we did some cooked radishes actually, which is how I like them. So that's there. And then if you scroll down, you'll get to some different sections where it says buy local and eat local, and then more about the local food system. And so why don't we go to the buy local? So in terms of sourcing, there are, of course, farmers markets. If any of you guys are new to Solano County, the farmers markets around here tend to start around April or May, and then they go through October. I know that Vallejo has some year-round ones, so that's always nice to know if you're looking for some fresh local food year-round. Also, some of our local farmers have CSA programs, which is community supported agriculture. And if you've been on these classes before, you might know what that is. There was a new CSA started by Wilkinson Acres, Wilkinson Acres is a local farm near Fairfield. It's run by Mike and Courtney Wilkinson. Great, great people. We really like them a lot. And so they just started last winter a new CSA, and they are now, I believe, taking signups for their spring and summer one. So you can check that out. And then we also have more listings about like where, oh yeah, there's the CSA site that Allison is showing you guys. Okay, cool. And then let's see, there's also a little bit of information about, you can go to the recipes and the cooking classes there and see those resources. We have, you're probably familiar with that. So we also have a seasonality chart. Let's show that. I kind of like to show people the seasonality chart because we've been realizing lately that it's tricky to eat and cook seasonally. If you're not really used to it or if you don't know really what's growing. So this is kind of a useful tool to help plan if you guys like to plan your menus out. This was from Terra Firma, T-E-R-R-A. So I adapted it from their seasonality chart, and they're up by winters. They have a pretty robust CSA program all over the Bay Area. I know they deliver to Benicia. I believe they also deliver to Vacaville, and I'm hoping to get them set up along with some other CSAs, maybe in Vallejo. So if any of you guys are in Vallejo. So anyway, just another tool there on our website. What else? I think that's kind of the bulk of it. I just wanted to kind of review that. And then if you want to learn more about the projects, that's under the local food system circle, which is over on the right. So, okay, I think that's it. All right, thank you, Allison. So I'm just getting my garlic ready here for this soup. It's kind of a repeat of the other garlic from the other recipe. So again, I'm just going to mince this up. And then I think I'm about ready to go back to what I was doing there with the leeks. Okay. A little more chop, chop, chop. Okay. All right, let me turn this back on. Okay. Okay, so my leeks are in. I'm going to go ahead and add my red pepper flakes, which should be right here. So I'm putting in about a quarter teaspoon. You can go higher if you want more spice, or lower if you don't. Totally up to you. It also depends on how spicy your sausage of choice is, if you want to include that. But again, it's not necessary. And then we're going to put in the garlic. Let me give that a little mix. I'm going to give the garlic one last little chop to make it a little bit finer. Okay. All right, in goes my garlic, and then think it's about time to add the potatoes. Yeah, potatoes, broth, and water. Okay, so this has some chicken broth and some water. Then we're gonna add both. So I have 4 cups of chicken broth here. I'll go ahead and put my potatoes in. And then I also need a quart of water. You're probably wondering, why don't I have my own chicken stock? Yeah, well, maybe when it's not COVID and my children are back in school. So another day. So you could probably also just do all water with this recipe if you didn't have the chicken stock. But I do find that it helps with the flavor a little bit. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna let this come to a boil. And then we are about done with the ingredients for this thing. I'm gonna go get out my kale and collards that I'm using for this particular recipe. Okay, so here's the dino kale. It's a little more flat. The other kale that I used was kind of curly. We are going to do the chop routine, just like I did before. See, I think I'll do that. Okay, so again, I'm going to strip off the stem, stick it in here. Some of these are small, so I do feel like I'm just going to kind of strip. Sometimes the dino kale is easy to strip with your hands, but you can definitely do the other method if you want. And then toward the bottom of this pile, I will get to my collard greens. Also, some of these dino kale leaves are kind of small and pretty tender, so I may not even bother with the stemming business here. So this is going to take me a few minutes. So I want to talk a little bit about the health benefits of all of these tasty veggies here that we have. So, you know, kale has kind of come into the spotlight in the last few years, and it's really, really good, a good source of vitamin A and C and K. The good thing about some winter greens, like spinach, for example, you know, spinach has all of those same vitamins as well. However, it has a little more iron, and the spinach also has folate and magnesium. And what you can do with spinach, especially to get the iron out more easily, is to pair it up with citrus. So for example, you could make a spinach salad and put some oranges on there with some walnuts and maybe some goat cheese. It's actually one of my favorite salads during the winter time. And so the vitamin C from the citrus will help your body absorb the iron from the spinach. So just a little FYI there. So I'm about done with my dino kale here. See how fast this goes? And I'm going to get to my collards. I only had about 6 ounces of collard greens, and I needed, I believe, a pound. I needed a pound of something. Yeah, I needed a pound of greens. Again, I weighed it, you know, before I did all this chopping. And so I needed to fill in with some dino kale. So here we are. So this is going to be a little concoction of, these are small, I'm going to forget those. Okay, so here is my collard green. It looks like a fan. They're nice and big. And actually, these are kind of actually small for collard greens. You know, when you see these at the store, sometimes they're just huge. So collards, you know, have, again, a lot of the same vitamins as the kale and the spinach, but collards are actually also very high in calcium. So it's a good reason to use those. And I'm doing the same kind of chopping, stripping thing with those. And the collards I'm going to keep just in a separate little pile here because those are going to need a little more cutting down because the leaves are so big. Okay, so there's just a few of these because there wasn't a very big bunch that I ended up with from the store. So, all right, we're about done there. Let's see how we're doing. Almost 5 o'clock. Okay, getting there. I think I'll be able to show you the braised thing there in a minute. That looked like it was about done. Okay, we're on the last 2 here, I promise. Okay, so for my collards, I'm just going to pile them up. So now I kind of have these little, round sections, half moons, kind of varies, depends on if I got all the way through it or not. So I'm just going to make a little pile here on my cutting board. I think you guys can see that. Move this. And I'm just going to cut them into like roughly, 1 inch by 3 inches and maybe even go once crosswise and call it a day. Because, like any other green, it will shrink up and get small when it cooks. Let's go across, turn it, do a couple more chops. This does not have to be perfect in particular by any means. Okay, and all my dino kale, it just kind of is in strips already from that. So I'm just gonna give it a quick chop, more or less crosswise. Throw that into the bowl. A couple more handfuls here. There's another green that I don't have an example of, but I thought I would talk about, which is chard. And Swiss chard, I think, would also work well for the braised dish with the coconut. So if you're short on any of these other ones and you have some Swiss chard sitting around, feel free to use that and experiment with that too. Okay, there's my kale and collard concoction. And this is being a little slow over here, and it's like almost 5 o'clock. So I think what I'll do is take some questions while we're waiting for this, and then I'll just show you guys the last, basic step of the soup, because it's pretty much, the last part finishes quickly. So, we've done our aromatics, we added our garlic, we got our potatoes in there. So now what we're waiting for is the potatoes to get tender. Once this boils, it'll take about 5 to 10 minutes. Those potatoes don't take too long. I cut them up, relatively small, like 1/2 to 3/4 inch cubes or so. And then let me get the blender out and I'll just kind of show you that last step, because that's kind of the important part of this soup that I do want to show you. So, so Allison, if there's questions, I can take those, and I'm also going to grab get my blender over here, which is just on the counter.
Yeah, there are a lot of great questions that have come up. Thank you to those of you who've been responding with some of the things that you do in the kitchen. And I'm going to real quick also share our link for our survey.
Yes, the survey. This is so important. It really helps us with reporting. I'm going to try to not unplug the burner here. Yeah, in fact, we have a meeting with some of our funders. I think it's next week. So we need survey results. So please fill out that survey. Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, it's a great way to give us an idea of, what actions you're taking, and also ideas on future classes you'd like. So for questions, so Stephanie, there was a question about the use of the spines or ribs from any of the leaves. And there were some suggestions in the chat of what other folks do with them, but do you do anything in particular with those?
I don't do a lot with them, but the only thing I could think of is that you could just put them into like a veggie stock. I don't know. I don't think the flavor, you'd have to balance it out, I think, with some other ingredients. But no, I would love to hear what other people do with them. So
yeah, there's a suggestion besides stock of chopping them and soft sauteing them with onions to add to like eggs or spaghetti sauce, that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, that could work. That might work really well. This is collards. Do they taste good raw? Anybody? Anyone?
Collards raw or the stalk raw?
Collards or the kale stems? Here's a kale stem.
There actually was a question about with the dino kale, if that's something that you could eat the leaves raw.
You can, yeah. Dino kale works really well in kale salads. You do have to kind of work a little bit to break it down. I mean, it's best if you can kind of, I don't know, some people massage their kale. You could mix it with a little bit of your vinaigrette ahead of time, and any acid in there will help to break it down. But yes, you can do the kale raw. Now, that being said, you know, sometimes you end up with a bunch of kale that's just tough, and it's just, it grew too big or for whatever reason. So baby kale would work better in that kind of an application for your salads. But, you know, if it is tough, then cook it. So I don't know. Collards, I've never really heard about eating collards raw though, but the kale you can.
Okay. And then there were a few questions on like a difference between kale and chard, chard versus kale. If there's anything in kale that you can't get in chard, if somebody prefers the flavor of the chard in the dish.
Okay, so say that again. Is there, the question is if you like chard or if you like kale, or
yeah, so in this case, you know, let's say you prefer the flavor of the shards, then is there anything in kale that you can't get in the chard that you should be eating the kale for?
Oh, in terms of vitamins and such. Got it. You know, the chard, you know, has really good antioxidants, which are like anti-inflammatory. Chard is used a lot in Mediterranean cooking and in the Mediterranean diet. So, you know, that could be one consideration for using chard. I mean, in terms of the kale though, I mean, it also has this thing called, you know, quercetin, which is an anti, you know, inflammatory. You know, I would think that, I think the kale has a few more vitamins in it than the chard. In terms of a cooking point, you know, the chard tends to cook a little faster, and it's not, you know, it doesn't cook as fast as spinach, but if you're looking to get something done quickly, like on a weeknight, then chard is a really good option. You can braise it, you know, just kind of like I'm doing over here. I usually start by sauteing it with some olive oil, and then I'll add a little bit of water or veggie broth or whatever, and then put the lid on. And in literally probably like 5 to 7 minutes, it's ready to go. So, you know, that's just one thing to think about. And it's kind of pretty when you get rainbow chard. You know, it's a lovely looking dish too. I'm going to check our coconut thing over here.
We've got some great, yeah, more recommendations on cooking collards in the Instapot, and
oh yeah, okay.
cooking them with fish and using raw collards to make pesto. So thank you guys again for those. And then there were a few substitution questions. Do you want those now, or?
Sure. I think the this is just starting to boil. Yeah, we might go about 10 or 15 minutes over, I think, on this class. So, but yeah, that's fine. We can, you know what, let me finish up the braised thing over there. It's done. So let's finish that up, and then yes, we will move on to substitution questions. So let me just grab another towel. I'm just gonna put something down here. Okay. So I don't think, let's see, is there anything else left to add here? I don't think so. Just the lime juice. Yeah, so the last step on this would be to remove the lid and just let it cook to reduce and kind of evaporate your liquid that might be left. And so it kind of did that on its own over here. I think I had the lid cracked just a tad. And so now what I have, I'm going to just go ahead and add the lime juice and dish this up because I think it's done, and I'll show you what it looks like. Let's see, here's my lime juice. You could also add a little extra oil at the end if you want. You know, if you're really a fan of coconut, you can do a little coconut oil. but otherwise we're good here. Let's see, let me grab one of these. So another little topper for this curried dish is some cashews. So I have some cashews that are toasted. Which I can put on top. And, you know, here's the toasting nut process. It just goes on a dry sheet pan in the oven, 350, 375 for about 10 minutes or so. And then you can chop, I could probably chop these up, but for right now, I'm just going to do a little sprinkle. So little cashews go good with coconut. And so it ends up being a little drier. You know, it kind of looks like a sauteed dish almost. It's not soupy. It's not like we're really in that much of a sauce per se, but it's moist. You know, there's probably, you know, I'm looking in here and it's about maybe a tablespoon or two of liquid that's left, and that's about it. So it's kind of boils down, not boils down, but it steams down to a nice creamy consistency on the bottom of the pan. Okay, so that's that. Let's see, that's hot. Hold on. Okay, so. All right, let me check the potato thing here, and then we will talk about substitutions. Move this back over here. Like waiting for water to boil. Slow, it's slow today. I'm not sure what the deal is here. So, but that's okay. I can still demo the last bit, even if we're not all the way there. Okay, substitutions, yes.
Yeah, and apologies, there was a question about what part of the leek is usable for cooking before we get to the substitutions.
Oh, sure. Let's do the leek question. You want to use white and light green. So here's kind of what you end up with. Usually there's even more dark green tops, like up to here. I tend to chop these down a little bit before I put them in the fridge because I have short on space, right? So for this recipe, any recipe really, you want to kind of just stop where the white, this one doesn't have a whole lot of light green parts. Sometimes it's very distinguishable. You have like a white and then you kind of have the light green portion and then you have the dark green. So I would kind of just cut it off where you have where the light green changes to the dark green. You don't really want to add any of this, the dark green leaves, because they tend to be very tough. So white and light green sections of your leek is what you want to use. And then for the top of the leek, those dark green sections, that would be a good thing probably to add to your veggie stock when you're making use of your stems. I haven't, you know, I've cooked the dark green part before and it's just very stringy and fibrous. So what I've actually used it for is more of a decorative function. When I used to cater, I would cut them into strips and then just blanch them in some boiling water really quick. And then you can actually use it as a tie. So if you're doing like a bundle of carrots or asparagus or something, you just, you know, you make it soft and pliable and then you just wrap it around and use it like a tie and you have a fun little presentation for a dinner party. So that's another thing I've used the leek tops for. So, okay, anything else, Allison?
Yeah, so for substitutions, there was a question on what could be substituted for the coconut milk.
Okay, you could use cream or half and half if you want to go rich, because it's kind of like the idea of a creamed, it's almost like a curry version of a creamed spinach or a creamed green of some sort. So, I mean, that would be kind of my first instinct. You know, I don't know about some of the nut milks that are out there. I know there's some really good ones. I mean, I drink almond milk myself, but I'm kind of wondering if there's some kind of a nut milk that's designed to be thicker, almost like a creamer. I haven't really shopped around too much lately for that, but you know, that might be a consideration if you don't want to do coconut and you don't want to do the dairy. You know, I don't know how they would behave. I haven't worked with them that much, but that's something that you could explore. I also feel like, you know, if you didn't want the creaminess, you could just add some liquid and just braise it and be done, you know, but that cream from the coconut milk does kind of help balance out the spices from the ginger and the curry powder. So that's kind of why I'm inclined to say, you know, go towards something dairy-ish, but it, you know, it wouldn't really make or break it. You know, you can still cook your greens in just some kind of a liquid.
Okay.
Okay, finally, this is boiling. Okay, just got a timer so we don't forget about it. Okay.
Then there was a question on whether someone could add spinach to the kale curry dish if they didn't have enough kale. Would that work okay?
Yes. In fact, I intended to do that today. I had a little handful or two of spinach left in my fridge, and I thought about throwing it in, and then I forgot to take it out. So yes, you can. You can, you know, and that makes me think of actually a good point that I want to talk about, which is the cooking times of all these things. So let's say you do that. Let's say I have my braised greens over there, and I've got collards, I've got dino kale, I've got curly kale, and I've got spinach. So the collards are going to take usually the longest to cook. So I would put those in first and kind of mix them around, let them wilt a little bit, give them like 5 minutes or so. Then I would put in the kale of either type, the dino or the curly. And to be honest with you, I would let those braise first over there. Spinach cooks in literally like 30 seconds. So what I would do is once the heavier greens are done, then just throw your spinach in at the end and, you know, finish it off, and it'll just wilt really quickly, and then you're done. So now, all of that being said, what you should do is go ahead and weigh everything out before you start so that you have like the right amount, and that is going to coordinate well with your amount of liquid from like the coconut milk or whatever liquid you choose. So you'll have all of that, you know, rounded up, but in terms of when you add it, that's where you kind of need to break it up. So I hope that helps.
And then finally, there was some discussion about the Caldo Verde if you wanted a vegetarian option to substitute in for the chorizo. So there was a question of soy rizo or some other fake product or a hot spice mix. What would you suggest?
Sure. Yeah, so you could definitely put in your soy chorizo stuff. Absolutely, that would work fine. If you wanted to just avoid the meat or the soy altogether, you could just maybe add, if you wanted that spiciness, just add a little bit more of the red pepper flakes. I've done that before with this soup too. You can also exchange the chicken stock for vegetable broth. You know, it's pretty flexible. You will get I personally like it more with the little chorizo-y stuff, whatever you choose. I just feel like it kind of adds a little more depth and a little more, you know, I don't know if it's the paprika in here. Actually, it probably is the paprika. So, you know, I would maybe put in, if you have smoked paprika, it's usually from Spain. That would be excellent in this soup. So you could add like a dried, you know, the dry spice, so like a smoky paprika at the beginning when you saute your onions. And I would also probably beef up the garlic a little bit more and add your red pepper flakes and then proceed from there.
So,
right, cool. Yep.
Yeah, that was it for the substitution questions. There was one question about if you could talk a little more about when you would use olive oil as opposed to avocado oil.
Sure. So, you know, olive oil tends to be sold, you know, for its flavor, and a lot of it is also sold for its health benefits. And the thing about olive oil is that to get all of those benefits, you know, a lot of times you don't really want to cook it to get the health benefits. So I would use olive oil more in like vinaigrettes, for example. If you're going to grill something, I just wouldn't use a really expensive olive oil. And so the olive oil that I use for cooking is just kind of lower quality, because chances are that olive oil has already been heated up and it's lost some of its health properties anyway. So, oh good, I think we're about ready here. So the other thing is, you know, the olive oil does have specific flavor. And so like for the curry recipe, I really want to accentuate the coconut flavor and the ginger and all of that. So I just want to use something a little more neutral. I'm not a fan of canola oil. You know, it's hard to find an organic canola oil. And I've heard recently that it's a little healthier to consume oils that are from a fruit. Let me see if I get this right. I think a fruit and not a seed. So your fruits would be like avocado, olive. I don't know if coconut's a fruit or not, to be honest with you. Less on the seed-based oils. There's my timer. So, but it's really a matter of like the flavor and interfering with the flavor, but also in terms of the olive oil, it's a matter of like, do you want to have the health benefits or, you know, or not, or lose them or have them. So I don't know, does that make sense? I feel like I'm talking in circles a little bit. So, okay. All right, I think what we'll do now is we're gonna finish up this soup. I'll do the last couple of steps. My potatoes felt soft. Yep, okay, they are. Let me turn this down a little bit. Okay, so at this point, that needs a lot of salt, by the way. Let me throw in a couple big handfuls here. Okay. I should have put the salt in before the potatoes, because then the potatoes would soak it up. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out roughly, I think the recipe says 3/4 of a cup. I'm not going to bother to measure this. This is roughly a cup. So I'm going to take out 3/4 cup-ish of solids, which are my potatoes and my leeks. And I'm just going to do a little extra here. And then this is probably about a 1 cup measuring cup. I'm going to pull out some of the liquid and put that into my blender. All right, I'm just going to do a little more. I feel like it's good to add on. Okay, now this is still boiling. And as you can see, we haven't added our greens yet. So now that I've pulled out that little bit, I'm going to throw the greens in and let them cook while I'm doing this last step. I'm going to kind of mash these down. And I'll put the lid on and let that wilt. Okay. All right, turn that back up. There you go. Okay, now what we're going to do is this emulsified business. And so I'm just going to measure out some olive oil. Let's see here. I forget what I need. I think it's 4 tablespoons. No, 3 tablespoons of olive oil. Yeah. This is a new olive oil that I found. It's made in Green Valley. It's by Rock Creek Vineyard Estate Olive Oil, if anyone's interested. Looks like that. Any of you are near Green Valley. Okay, so the blender top goes on. Keep in mind, this is super hot. So you want to have, I'm going to take the little lid thing off because you need to have a little bit of steam escape when you're doing this. And be careful, hold a towel or something over. So I'm going to turn this on. I'm just going to mix it a little bit first. Okay, just to kind of get it going. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drizzle in my olive oil while this is running, and I'm going to crank it up to like liquefy it or puree, whatever setting you have that's kind of high, and it's going to just spin it all around, and it's going to really blend together my water-based ingredients, which are in the blender, with the oil here. Okay, so let me just get this going again. Okay, that was that. Now you saw how I poured it in really slow, and I'll show you what this looks like. Let's see here. I don't know if you can see it. A little glass. So you can see it's like really kind of viscous. It's like, you know, got really thick. It's like thick, creamy. So this is what we're going to add back into our soup over there. and it is completely blended. The oil and the stock and the water and all the stuff that we have there. Plus we've also blended up all of our aromatics and, well, not all of them, but we've got, you know, some of the leeks and the garlic got mixed up in there too. Okay. And so now I don't think my greens are quite done, but once my greens are done cooking, then all we do is we just add these two things back in. We add this mixture into the soup and our chorizo stuff into the soup. And then if you want to put in like a teaspoon or two of white wine vinegar, that goes in, and then it's done. So I think it's going to take me a little bit for this to cook, and I'm hoping to eat this later. So I'm actually going to do it right and not shortcut it for the purpose of, you know, food TV here. And I think that is it. And then of course at the end, test your salt. Definitely test your salt level after you've added your chorizo back in, because that is going to have some saltiness to it as well. So, okay, I think that is it.